What's up, guys? I'm here today to help you go over some of the answers to your Unit 2 study guide to help you prepare for your test that you guys will be taking on Friday. So let's go ahead and get into it, not waste any time. This video can only go for 15 minutes. That's all it'll give me, so I want to try to get through as many of these as I possibly can. Alright, so the first, 15 or so questions, almost 20 I guess, they're going to just simply ask you to tell me the significance of each of these terms. So let's start with the first one, the Whiskey Rebellion. Remember, this is when a group of Western farmers who produce a lot of whiskey, they get upset about the excise tax that's been placed on whiskey as part of Alexander Hamilton's financial plan to help pay off all the debt that the young nation had accumulated during the American Revolution. So they rise up, they rebel, they kind of are just pushing the buttons, trying to see what they can get away with because the government's still very new. And no one knew if the government actually had the strength to really enforce the law. So they're pushing to kind of test their luck to see what they can get away with. But George Washington responds with an iron fist, sends 12,000 troops in to deal with a much smaller contingent of farmers, and puts down the Whiskey Rebellion very easily and very quickly without much trouble at all. So the reason this is significant is because it shows very early on in the history of the United States under the new Constitution. It shows that the federal government is strong enough to enforce the law and maintain law and order inside the United States. Let's go down to number 2 and 3. I actually want to go to number 3 before I do number 2 because they're kind of related. Remember, the Alien Sedition Acts were signed into law by John Adams, who was the second president after George Washington. And basically what the Alien Sedition Acts did was, the first part, the Alien Act, made it very difficult for immigrants to gain U.S. citizenship. And the second part, the Sedition Acts, basically made it illegal to criticize the government and or the president, which is a clear constitutional violation. It violates your First Amendment right to freedom of speech, freedom of press. A lot of people were thrown in jail. Newspaper writers were thrown in jail for printing things that were negative about the government. People who were just speaking in private, their own thoughts, and happened to criticize John Adams or the government in any way, they were thrown in jail. A lot of people were put in jail over this. So it's clearly unconstitutional. And that's really why John Adams didn't win his re-election bid after his first term. So let's now go to number 2. The Kentucky and Virginia resolutions was a response to the Alien Sedition Acts written by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. And these documents were significant because in these documents, Madison and Jefferson, for the first time, they used the argument of states' rights and nullification. The idea that a state can nullify, the state has the right to nullify or cancel out a federal law if they feel like that federal law is unconstitutional, like they did with the Alien and Sedition Acts. So there's the significance of those two. The Northwest Ordinance, talked a little bit about in class, part of the Treaty of Paris of 1783 that gave the United States their independence from Great Britain after the Revolutionary War. Part of that was the United States got some more land from Great Britain, which at the time was northwest of what they had already had with the original 13 colonies and 13 states. Territories which are today like the states of Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, those kind of areas. So with all this new territory, you want to figure out an orderly way to divide that land up and then to also add those territories gradually, step by step, into the United States as new states. So that's what the Northwest Ordinance did. It established a process by which those territories would be added to the United States as new states. Louisiana Purchase, known in 1803. Thomas Jefferson is the president. He was elected in 1800, and one of the big things he did during his first term was he bought the Louisiana Territory from France. Napoleon Bonaparte, the French emperor at that time, he's looking to make some cash. He's fighting wars all over the country. Those are expensive, or all over the world, I should say. The wars are expensive, so he needs some money. So he thinks a quick way to earn or to get some money would be to sell the Louisiana Territory he had in North America to the Americans for what eventually comes out to be a total of $15 million. And the significance of this is it instantly doubles the land size of the continental United States. Lewis and Clark, we know that once Louisiana Purchase is made, Jefferson buys this Louisiana Territory. No one knows what's out there. So he sends two guys, Meriwether Lewis and Lewis Clark, out into this land to try to determine where the best areas for settlement, what's out there, who's out there, is this possible that we're actually going to be able to do this, and to also claim further land for the United States. They actually make their way to the Pacific Ocean and claim a lot of that territory for the United States as well. Let's move on to the War of 1812. So after Thomas Jefferson comes James Madison. He's the fourth president of the United States. He's one of Jefferson's close friends, a Democratic Republican. And he's president during the War of 1812. So, A couple of reasons why this war was fought. Still some kind of bitter feelings over the American Revolution. The British are impressing U.S. sailors, basically sailors that were from the United States that were simply trying to trade out in the ocean. Their boats are being stopped. The British are boarding them. The British Navy is kidnapping American sailors basically and forcing them to serve in the British Navy because a lot of the sailors in the British Navy they were leaving. They were deserting because they didn't want to be in the Navy any longer. So in order to keep their Navy afloat and actually have people to fight, they just started kidnapping Americans. Since they still talk like British people, they could claim, oh, well, these used to be British sailors, so we're not going to put them back in the British Navy. Of course, that's completely illegal, and that was something that really made Americans very upset. America tried to stay neutral in the war, but obviously in the conflict between France and Great Britain didn't last very long, and eventually the United States ends up in war again with Great Britain in 1812. This is significant. I want to fast forward to the outcome. There's a couple of things that make this significant. First off, the Federalist Party is going to be dead after the War of 1812. And another big thing is that no one won or lost the war. It was kind of a draw, a stalemate, if you will. No side either gained or really lost all that much land. So the significance for that is the United States didn't lose. They didn't win, but they didn't lose. So they gained a lot of respect around the world from countries that has still kind of viewed the United States with skepticism. There's basically going to be a newfound level of respect for the United States from countries around the world. And also, one of the factors to remember here is during the war, Americans can't really trade with Europe all that much, particularly with Great Britain, which is a country they had previously relied on trading with for their economy to be able to function like it needed to. So if you can't trade with Great Britain and you can't get the materials you need from them, Americans in the Northeast start to build their own factories, their own manufacturing plants, so they can produce a lot of these materials in their own country without having to rely on trading with Britain to get them. So that's going to move the country forward and make the Industrial Revolution inside the United States a possibility. All right, number 8 also goes with the War of 1812, the Hartford Convention. This is at the end of the war, a group of Federalists meet together in Hartford, Connecticut to discuss some of the economic issues they were having. Remember the Federalists in the Northeast, they rely on trade for their economy with the British, so they're upset about the war because they can't trade with the British. They're losing a lot of money. So at this convention, they talk about all their problems and they drop a list of demands, and that's fine. But the mistake they make is that they also add in a threat. And they threaten to secede from the United States if their demands are not met. When your country's in the middle of the war and everyone's trying to unite the country during this time of conflict, you have a group of people, one of the political parties is now threatening to leave the United States during the war. They're going to be seen as traitors. And now no one's going to want to be a Federalist, and that party is going to essentially be dead after the Hartford Convention. That's why it's significant. Number 9, the Erie Canal. Its significance is that it connects Lake Erie, the western part of the United States, with the Atlantic Ocean, which makes it easier for western farmers to transport their goods, from their farms to the ocean, where they can then trade those goods with countries overseas. Helps their economy. The cotton gin, number 10, makes a lot. The significance of this is it makes it a lot easier to produce cotton because it takes the seeds out of cotton. If cotton's easier to produce, it means more people in the southern states are going to start growing cotton. If more people in the southern states start growing cotton, that then means they're going to need more slaves because they're the ones who are going to be doing all this labor. So, long story short, the cotton gin, the significance of that is it makes slavery even more important to the South, which is going to lead us to the Civil War shortly. Number 11, the Monroe Doctrine. Now we're entering the era of good feelings when there's only one political party, the Democratic Republicans. There's no war going on. Everyone's kind of feeling good about life in the United States. James Monroe is the new president, and he issues a doctrine where he kind of divides the world in half between the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere. Obviously, the United States is in the Western Hemisphere, and this doctrine essentially says the United States is going to fight against any country who tries to come into the Americas, North America, South America, or Central America, anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, really, to try to establish colonies in the Western Hemisphere. Basically saying it's off limits to European colonization. And that's a policy the United States still has in effect today. Interchangeable parts was another invention by Eli Whitney, just like the cotton gin. And what the significance of the interchangeable parts is that this makes mass production possible, really makes the Industrial Revolution possible. You can produce goods at a much larger scale than you could before. Number 13, the manifest destiny. This is the concept that it's the destiny of the United States to expand west all the way to the Pacific Ocean. That's significant because it's going to lead to the United States conquering and taking a lot of land all the way to the Pacific Ocean to make up what is now the continental United States. Number 14, the Mexican-American War. It's part of manifest destiny. The significance of this war is that it added a large territory of land. It added to the United States what they call the Mexican Cession. and that gives the United States what is today the current states of California, all of Nevada, all of Utah, most of Arizona, about half of New Mexico, and a little bit of Colorado as well. So it adds more land to the United States. Missouri Compromise, this is where Missouri, remember as we're moving out west, you got to add these territories as states. Well, the big question you have to answer is a state going to be a slave state or a free state? Missouri wants to become a slave state. Well, that's a problem, because when Missouri wants to become a slave state, the number of states was tied, 11 free states, 11 slave states. So they each had an equal number of representatives in Congress. So neither side had more control over the government than the other did. Now, Missouri is going to put it out of balance. So to compromise, they decide, okay, we're going to add Missouri as a slave state, but we're also going to add Maine as a free state. So now it's 12 free states, 12 slave states. It's still balanced, still equal. And they also take it a step further, and they draw a line at Missouri's southern border at 3630 longitude and latitude. They say above this line, from now on, when any state is added to the Constitution or added to the country, it cannot allow slavery. It has to be a free state. Number 16, Jacksonian democracy. Remember, Jackson was a man of the people. He was a common man just like most of the people in the United States. So the significance of this is that it expands democracy for more people in the United States. More people are allowed to participate in American democracy. Basically, they remove the property voting requirements and allow more people to vote. Seneca Falls Convention, this is where the women meet for the first time as an organized group to try to argue for equal treatment under the law. Significance is it really puts women on the path towards achieving more rights, particularly the right to vote. Number 18, the corrupt bargain. This is where in the election of 1824, Andrew Jackson loses, even though he wins more popular votes and more electoral votes. He didn't get enough votes, enough of a majority, so the election goes to the House of Representatives. Henry Clay was the leader of the House of Representatives at that time. He was the Speaker of the House, and he uses his influence to get the people in the House of Representatives to vote for John Quincy Adams as president, and in return for that favor, John Quincy Adams names him his Secretary of State. And Andrew Jackson saw this as a corrupt bargain, basically stealing the election from him and from the people, and it helps him win the election of 1828, 4 years later. Federalist era notes. Number 20, what were the three pieces of advice George Washington left the nation with in his farewell address? Remember, he said, to avoid political parties, to avoid foreign entanglements, basically treaties and alliances with foreign countries, and also dealings with foreign countries, and to also avoid sectionalism, the differences between the North and the South. Stop fighting between each other inside the same country. 21, who was George Washington's first Secretary of State? That was Thomas Jefferson. Number 22, Alexander Hamilton was his first Secretary of the Treasury. Number 23, the Federalist Party was led by Alexander Hamilton. His rival, Thomas Jefferson, number 24, was the leader of the Democratic-Republican Party. 25, 3 parts of Alexander Hamilton's financial plan was for the federal government to pay off all the debt in the country, including the debts that the states had built up. To pay off that debt, the second part would be to institute new taxes for the government to get money to pay the debt. And the third part would be to have a national bank that the government could then deposit its tax money in and then take that money out if necessary. 26, what did the Democrat Republicans get in return for agreeing to all of Hamilton's financial plans? They got the nation's capital moved to Washington, D.C. from Philadelphia. The Federalist Party, 4 basic beliefs. Alexander Hamilton's their leader. They believe in a strong central government. They supported the Constitution. They supported the Bank of the United States. Most of them were wealthy elites. Most of them lived in the Northeast. The Democrat Republicans are basically the opposite. Thomas Jefferson's their leader. They favor state governments having more power than the federal government because they were afraid the powerful federal government would violate their rights. They were against the Constitution at first when it was trying to go through the ratification process because they were concerned that it did not protect individual rights. They were in favor of adding a Bill of Rights, which ultimately they ended up getting established. They were typically more the common man, farmers, and most of them lived down in the southern states. H. Jefferson notes, number 29, Sacagawea, remember she was the guide, the interpreter for Lewis and Clark on their journey through the Louisiana Territory. The War Hawks, number 30, these were a group of southern and western congressmen who were pushing for war against Great Britain, pretty much because they wanted to gain more territory, particularly Canada. The name of the peace treaty that ended the War of 1812 was the Treaty of Ghent. 3 effects, we've already talked about that up earlier. Number 33, what did Jefferson use to deal with British and French violations of American neutrality? So America is neutral during the conflict between Britain and France, but the British were impressing their soldiers and harassing them. So to try to stop this from happening, he issued the Embargo Act of 1807, which said the United States is just simply not going to trade with European countries anymore until this harassment stops. Era of good feeling, national infrastructure talks about transportation systems like canals, roads, bridges that are going to help the country. We talked about the Missouri Compromise.